and welcome to an episode on sports photography. The subject expert today is Kumar Barun and I am Sakshi Mandwal. To understand the meaning of sports photography, to comprehend the qualities required to become a successful sports photographer, to know the various equipments used for sports photography, and to understand the light and location to be used for sports photography. Sports photography is one of the very few remaining pure forms of documentary photography. The moment happens in fraction of a second and it's gone. One either captures it in an image or one couldn't. Unlike sports writers and videographers, still photographers have to capture the moment live and while it's happening, as they don't have the privilege of any instant replay with them. Sports photography not only captures the remarkable skills and abilities of the athletes, in fact, it also intends to capture the emotions and passions of those involved in the game. Sports photography is also treated as sports journalism. In fact, there are two kinds of sports photography which are very popular. They are photographs taken of people playing with each other in general, and sports journalism. Photographs of state, national or international tournaments, example, Olympics, Commonwealth Games, etc. is termed as sports photography. These events are mostly covered in newspapers. The main purpose of professional sports photography is for editorial purposes. Dedicated sports photographers usually work for newspapers, major wire agencies or dedicated sports magazines. However, sports photography is also used for advertising purposes, both to build a brand and as well as to promote a sport in a way that cannot be accomplished by editorial means. What does it take to become a sports photographer? Sports photography is a great genre for those who love both sports and photography. But a few things have to be understood before one thinks about starting with this career, which are: Number 1. Skill could be developed. Also, as one gets more and more experienced clicking spots, he is able to capture the right movements and hence, skill sets increase and improves over a period of time. One should have some basic knowledge of both, that is, photography and sports. One must know how the camera works inside and outside. It is important that a camera person should technically understand the working of his equipment in order to control its functions and derive the best results from the machine. one may learn the working of the equipment and operating the same. But till the time the craft is not put to practice, a sports photographer can't be perfect. Skills improve dramatically with practice and atrophy with disuse. One's philosophy and attitude towards his profession immensely affects his work. As sports photography is candid, one needs to be quick with capturing the right moment and emotion. Remember, if it's gone once, it's gone forever. Equipment used for sports photography is a digital single-lens reflex camera (DSLR) with high shutter speeds, interchangeable lenses that have 50 mm and can be zoomed or changed to 300 mm zoom depending on the type of sport. Lenses are very important to reach closer or farther as fast as possible to stay with the gameplay. A monopod or a tripod for stability and extra batteries are essential. Preferred camera bodies for the modern sport photographer are those with fast autofocusing ability and a high frame rate, usually 8 frames per second or faster. Since the photographer has to take several different shots during sports photography, it becomes very difficult to change lenses really fast. Therefore, it's advisable to carry an extra camera. This helps in two ways. One, the photographer gets a different perspective for the pictures every time due to using a different camera. Second, there is no fear of battery exhaustion considering a spare camera is always handy. Due to the sturdy and stable nature of the tripod, it becomes easier for any photographer to take photographs without witnessing jerks or shaky movement. It is also very useful as there is no problem in using the camera for either longer duration or for shots which require a minimum height and great stability. Spare batteries are extremely useful when one knows that the shoot will take long, especially also because one cannot take a risk with technology. Therefore, it is advisable to always carry an extra battery, especially whenever two cameras are used, and that too for a shoot that is important and will take some time. As the photographer does not know how many pictures would be taken and might just exceed than the expectation, images could get distorted. Therefore, in order to avoid such blunders and goof-ups, It's always advisable to carry a spare memory card, and that too at least 8 GB, in order to take as many options as one wants. Different sports favor different lenses, but sports photography usually requires fast, wide aperture telephoto lenses with fast autofocus performance. Fast autofocus is needed to focus on movement, telephoto to get close to the action, and wide aperture serves several purposes. In outdoor sports, the distances are greater and the light brighter, while in indoor sports the distances are lesser and the light dimmer. In contrast to the outdoor sports, indoor sports tend to have shorter long lens lenses. Both zoom and prime lenses are used. Zoom generally in the 70 to 200, 75 to 300 or 100 to 400 range allow a greater range of framing, while primes are faster, cheaper, lighter and optically superior while being more restricted in framing. Apertures of the capacity of f/2.8 or faster are more often used, though f/4 is also found particularly on the brighter days. Particularly visible are the telephoto lenses, whose distinctive white casing to dissipate the sun's heat is recognizable at many sporting events. This varies with sports and preference. For example, golf photographers may prefer to use a 500 mm f/4 as opposed to a 400 mm f/2.8, as it is a lighter lens to be carried around all day. The location is often important for sports photography. At big events, professional photographers often shoot from VIP spots with the best views, usually as close to the action as possible. Most sports require the photographer to frame their image with speed and adjust camera settings spontaneously to prevent blurring or incorrect exposure. Some sports photography is also done from a distance to give the game a unique effect. Shutter speed is critical to catching motion. Thus, sports photography is often done in a shutter priority mode or manual. ISO speed is often high to allow faster shutter speeds and may be left in auto. Photos are often taken in burst mode to capture the best moment, sometimes in combination with JPEG rather than the raw shooting. JPEG files being smaller, these allow longer bursts. Light is a form of radiant energy that we can see with our eyes and record with a camera. It's a primary method of obtaining information about the world. Light in terms of quantity, quality and color is also the most important element of photography, which affects the technical quality of our sports pictures. Unfortunately, in many cases for sports action photography, there is not much we can do about any of these factors. We usually just have to work with what is there. In some cases, we may be able to set up strobes to provide our own main source of light or use a strobe as fill to supplement existing light. The amount of light illuminating our sports event plays a critical role in our ability to use a high shutter speed to freeze the action. At one extreme, we can have an abundance of direct sunshine and plenty of light. At the other end, we might have only a little light from a few dim bulbs in a school gymnasium. Quality basically describes the light's nature in terms of direction, softness or hardness. A simple example of hard light is that of a direct flash or noon sunshine. While the stark light makes harsh shadows in comparison, soft light could be possible as of an effect of an overcast cloudy day. Colors play a major role in any photography for the matter, and colors are also responsible for adding mood and substance to photography. In order to understand various facets of sports photography, we shall start with understanding the various types of natural colors, which can also be created by humans for certain photography assignments. Although our eyes are very good at adapting the light sources of many different colors, our cameras are more objective and will record colors accurately for the most part. Late afternoon or early morning light is beautiful yellow-red color. Similarly, light from the sky in open shade or on a clear day can be very blue in color, and indoors, different light bulb types produce different colors. Tungsten bulbs produce red-yellow light and some fluorescents can produce green. Different color light sources can produce different colors in our images, and this is why it is important to set the color balance correctly in a digital camera. Exposure is referred to as the amount of light that hits the sensor in a camera and creates an image. In most cases, there is only one exposure that is correct. The amount of exposure must be adjusted to match the sensitivity of the sensor. Photographers mention exposure as stops. A stop is simply when the amount of light changes by a factor of 2 if the exposure changes by a stop. Then it either doubles or is cut into half. We have two ways of controlling the amount of light that reaches the sensors in our cameras and determines the correct exposure. That is, the shutter speed and the f/stop. The camera's ISO setting can also be adjusted to give further control over the exposure to the photographer. ISO stands for International Standards Organization. But in photography, it has a different meaning. ISO is a term that refers to the sensitivity of a sensor. ISO can be thought of as the relative sensitivity of the camera sensor to light. A camera with a higher base ISO would be more sensitive to light. Technically, the ISO standard only refers to the base sensitivity. Sensors really have only one level of sensitivity. Sensor output, however, can be adjusted to give the effect of adjustable ISO sensitivities. This is a complicated subject that is beyond the scope of this article, but you can cheat and think of changing the ISO by changing the sensitivity of your camera sensor. ISO setting generally runs from about ISO 5200 to ISO 1600 to 3200 or even to an extent of 6400 to the upper limit. Every time an ISO doubles, that is the equivalent of one stop in f/stops or shutter speeds. Higher numbers allow the use of shorter shutter speeds, although there is a heavy price to be paid, and that is higher noise in the image. Ideally, we want to use the lowest ISO that gives us the highest shutter speed that will stop the action. In situations with plenty of light, the f/stop can also be adjusted to provide correct exposure. In situations with little light, the lenses are used. When it comes to using widest aperture, lowest f/stop numbers such as f/2.8 and the ISO is adjusted to provide a shutter speed high enough to freeze the action. Placement of oneself along with the equipment also at times dictates the quality of photograph to be clicked. Therefore, for a photographer, location of the sport, his own location in the venue and his equipment set up at the location has to be done very meticulously and perfectly. A photographer can only photograph things he can see. The closer you are to someone, the better you get to see them. Sports are no different. One has to get as close to what you are shooting as he can see. Typically, a photographer with a press pass is permitted to enter the sidelines or other similar locations. The photographer is mostly not given access to the direct playing field, which also depends on the sport. Mostly, a photographer is most likely to be limited to the designated locations. For instance, at most football games, the media cannot shoot between the two 35-yard markers. For most people, the situation is even worse. Photographer probably doesn't have press access and are stuck in the stands for your shots. Therefore, the photographer needs to get as close as possible. Even if one can make it to the sidelines, you will be jostling for space with many other photographers, both still and video, who have worked hard to get there and have the same job to do that you have. The photographer also has to be familiar with the sport to be able to capture the moment. This means knowing where to position oneself for the best action. This is critical because of angular momentum that will be discussed in the section on freezing action. Not only does it matter with the subject, but the background. The photographer has to look at what is going to be behind the subject. In other words, pay attention to the scenario. While we will try to minimize the impact that a background has, it will still be unavoidable. So the photographer needs to position himself where the background is the most pleasing. photography is all about speed, fun and timing. A photographer should have sound technical knowledge with a clear bent of mind towards sports. Having an aptitude along with attitude creates a wonderful combination. Passion and understanding of sports photography can lead to creating historical pictures for generations to come, making sports photography an extravaganza for everybody and anybody. That is all that we have for you for today. Goodbye.